Welcome everyone to Rising Out of the Chrysalis Stories That Inspire with Marissa Grace, where we share life stories of struggle and triumph, not only of my own life experiences, but also through the experiences of my own guests, as a way to help you have breakthroughs and find hope in your own life. Welcome everyone, I'm Marissa Grace, and today I have a very special guest, Kelly Gifford, who has an amazing story to share. Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you about this and share my story from very early on, which I don't think I've ever really shared it in the way that I'm going to share it with you today. So this is going to be new for me too, and I'm curious how it's going to evolve as I really connect with such a long-term story that has been like the crux of my life.
Absolutely. And not only that, it's a topic that so many struggle with, right? I know I
Yeah.
struggle, and we're all talking about body image, the struggle of, and I think from my perspective and dealing with clients, women struggle with it a little bit more than men do, although there are men that also struggle with this. I
Mm-hmm.
know I went through it for a very, very long time into my adulthood. And so many of us struggle with this. So I'm curious, when did this all started? When did you became first aware of your body and how you felt so different about it and not connected with it anymore?
Yeah, I've reflected on this a lot and obviously doing my own healing work and going to therapy and really starting to dissect what created the environment that I remember being in for all of my teenage and young adult years, which we will get to. And it's so interesting to me how I can't even think of a time in my life where I didn't have awareness of my body because it goes back to such a young age. And the way that I have come to interpret it is that I had experiences like anyone else has when they're younger that are painful. So I experienced some kind of discomfort, whether it was something happened that I didn't expect, or I didn't get something that I wanted, or I felt shamed or embarrassed or lonely or whatever it is. And as a child, wanted to figure out why so that I could try to get ahead of it and fix it. And having that need to control the discomfort or the pain that I was having at such a young age, the one thing that I found that I could blame it on, and that I did blame it on, was my body. And that just became an ongoing perception theme of everything that I was experiencing in my life. And so from a very young age, I started to learn and find evidence that the reason why bad things happened to me was because of my body. And I just continued looking for evidence to support that that could be true. And so the very first time that I had a crush on a boy and he didn't like me back, it was, oh, it must be because of my body. The very first time that I had a friend who didn't really seem to care about me that much, when I told her that I was going to be moving across the country and she seemed to not really care, I was like, oh, it must be because of my body. It must be because I'm not good enough, that she doesn't really care about me that much because I have low value based on the fact that my body looks the way that it does. When I moved across the country and went to a new school and didn't make new friends right away, oh, it must be because of my body. When I heard that other girls were talking about me behind my back and saying mean things about me, it was, oh, it must be because of my body. And it was always just the immediate interpretation that I was making on things for as long as I can remember. And I really think that that's because it was just the first thing that I felt like I could interpret about myself of why it could be the way, why people, what was wrong with me, what was different about me, so that I could try to figure out what it was and get ahead of it. And all that I knew was that my body was different than the people that were surrounding me, than the other girls in my class. Even at a very young age, I was taller than a lot of the other girls in my class, which is funny because I'm actually quite short now. I think I just stopped growing when I was like a little child. But I was taller than everyone. I went through puberty earlier than everyone. I was bigger than everyone. I wore glasses. I had crooked teeth. I had brown hair, not blonde hair. Like all of these different things that I was interpreting were different about me. And then blaming everything that was uncomfortable or painful on that fact, because it felt like it was something that I could grab onto and have some sense of control over.
And once you started, forming these beliefs, because that's what we do, we start
Yeah.
forming these beliefs and find the evidence to support the belief that we now convinced ourselves that, this must be true, and here's the evidence. What did you decide to do? Like, what were the things that you started doing? Because at some point, when we start blaming, okay, is there something wrong with my body? Maybe I should start fixing this, or maybe I should
Right.
start fixing that. Maybe if I look different, I'll get a different response.
Mm-hmm.
If I do this and change my hair color, maybe I'll get, a different response as well. Maybe people will like me better.
Yeah.
What did you started doing?
I think the very first thing I started to do was dress differently. So at one point, I just started refusing wearing the clothes that I had. And my poor mother like had to throw out all of my clothes. So I was like, these are just not good enough. I need better clothes. Like these are the types of clothes that the girls in my class are wearing. And I made her get me an entirely different wardrobe as my potential solution to finally fitting in and escaping the loneliness and the insecurity that I was feeling by hopefully being accepted and being popular, because this is what the popular girls were doing. They were dressing this way. And then I think when that didn't work, when that didn't seem to be a good solution, then it was starting to wear makeup. Well, maybe if I start wearing makeup and I can make myself look prettier, then maybe I'll fit in. But that ended up giving the opposite. And I actually got bullied for wearing makeup and was told that I looked like a WHORE for wearing makeup at the age of like 13. And so that didn't work. So then I was exhausting all of these different solutions that I felt like I had control over. And then I remember very distinctly in the sixth grade was the very first time that I attempted to go on a diet. And I think that that was the first time that I really started to understand that you could actually like sort of control the way that your body looks and the size of your body through just being exposed to different media and diet culture and magazines, and even just hearing members of my family making comments about themselves like, oh, my pants are getting a little bit tight. I'm going to order a salad at the restaurant, or I'm ordering exclusively Diet Pepsi now, or whatever. I started to make these connections myself. It was never something that I was actually blatantly taught, but I remember kind of having this understanding that, well, if I just eat less, maybe my body will change. Maybe my body will get smaller. And that being the very first time that I even considered that that was a possibility, because up until that point, I thought my body was just what my body was, right? And my first experience of trying to go on a diet was getting off the school bus or getting dropped off at school and heading right to the garbage can that was outside the entrance to school and dumping my entire lunch kit in the trash. And I remember just sitting through like snack time there, just like sitting there, twiddling my thumbs and looking around at everyone else eating their meals, eating their snacks, and same thing happening at lunch, and just like so desperately wanting people to say something, wanting people to notice, wanting someone to say like, oh, why aren't you eating? Like, are you not hungry? Did you forget your lunch? Do you want food? And when nobody said anything that first day, I remember taking that as confirmation that everyone agreed with what I was doing silently, that everyone was just confirming to me, like, okay, she's finally doing something about this. This is good, good for her, type of thing. They weren't trying to get me to change it. They weren't trying to offer me something else to eat. And then that became something that I just latched onto. And for probably the remainder of the sixth grade, I just did that same routine. Every morning I would get to school and I would dump my entire lunch kit in the trash. And of course, not really knowing how any of this worked, then after that, I would get home from school, or my mom would pick me up from school and I'd be like, Mom, I'm starving. Can we go through the McDonald's drive-through and like go get like a giant meal of fast food and probably make up those calories and then some? But again, being like 10, 11, 12 years old, not really understanding how any of this worked. And so it was my first attempt at a diet. From what I remember, it was absolutely not successful. And that started the beginning of probably the next 3 to 4 years of going through the same cycle of going on a kick of like, I need to just stop eating, or I need to start eating less and go on a diet and maybe even start working out. And then I would for like a week or 2 weeks or something like that, and then go back to what I was doing and rinse and repeat for 3 to 4 years, and started to really develop this identity within myself where I felt so ashamed, like I didn't have something in me, like I knew the solution, I knew I needed to change my body, but I wasn't. And it wasn't until I was 16, so I was in the 10th grade of high school, that I finally committed myself. I don't know exactly what was different about this time, but well, I can contribute a few things to maybe why it was different. One of them being I had just gone through a heartbreak and feeling like I needed to prove myself and get revenge, and really my way of escaping and pushing down all of the pain that I was experiencing, because the breakup that I experienced, the heartbreak that I experienced at the age of 16, of course, I was also blaming my body on that and blaming my appearance on that. And it felt like it was like the last straw, because it was this person, the first person ever, the first person of the opposite sex that had shown me interest, that made me for one moment feel like maybe I am good enough. Maybe my body is okay. Maybe my body isn't the reason why I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And then when that ended, it was like, I guess I'm wrong. I guess I was wrong. I guess I'm stupid. I need to do something about this. And it kicked me into gear. And I decided I was going to go on a diet and purged my parents' kitchen of everything that I knew that I wasn't supposed to eat if I wanted to lose weight, and started working out every day, which turned into working out 2 times a day, which turned into me working out almost like 6 hours a day for a period of time, and eating next to nothing. And I lost weight for the first time ever very rapidly, and I kept it off. And that was the very beginning of my, what I would consider my real eating disorder. And then for the next decade, essentially, I would go through these different periods of trying to heal from and escape the eating disorder after recognizing that it was a problem, by recognizing like, okay, maybe I'm too obsessive over this, or maybe this isn't sustainable, or maybe I'm actually not doing something healthy. And I would have this like moment of awakening and be like, okay, I'm actually not doing this in a healthy way. Let me back up. Let me get ahead of this and try to fix it. And then abandon something that I was doing, whether it was, I'm going to stop only eating clean, I'm going to let myself eat different foods, or I'm going to stop just eating 1,200 calories a day, or whatever it was. And then as soon as I would leave that, I would cling on to another set of rules. Like now, instead of only eating clean and cutting out all of these different types of foods, I'm going to just count my calories. And that felt less restrictive because I was opening myself up to eating more foods, but was then also limiting myself based on calories because that felt safe. And then when counting calories felt too restrictive, then I would abandon that and delete the app off my phone and then just only eat like 3 different meals because that was my way of controlling how many calories I was eating without actually counting them and then calling that healthier than what I was doing previously. And then this just same cycle kept rinsing and repeating over and over. I would realize, okay, maybe this is unhealthy. Maybe I'm being too restrictive. Let me back off of this and then let go of something and then immediately cling on to something else. And then later realize that was also unhealthy and too restrictive. And I remember just really starting to think that I had a problem with food, that I had an unhealthy relationship with food. And it wasn't until very recently that I really started to realize that this was never about food. It was never about my inability to trust myself around food. It was never about my um, emotional eating or it was never about me just not knowing how to eat properly to fuel my body. It was always about this incessant fear that lived in me that I was going to get proven right, that my body is the reason why bad things happen to me. And so anytime that I would come to some kind of awakening and realize, okay, maybe I need to not do this. I need to heal myself and I'm going to do this in a healthier way. My mind would only be okay with that for such a short period of time before the red flags came up. And it was like, okay, no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, during this time where you're playing around with these diets
Yeah.
and, these foods and, what to cut out, what to put in, and the exercising, like, how were you feeling? Like, were you feeling energized? Was it like a roller coaster ride that you kind of,
Mm,
besides the emotional parts that you're already dealing with,
right.
was it affecting
Mm,
you like in other ways as well? Because now you're
yeah.
on this roller coaster of trying out different diets, different foods, and putting your
Right.
body through this process. How did that impact you?
It impacted everything. And it's so crazy to admit this, but from like the age of 16 to like 24, I almost have no memory of what happened in my life other than just like waking up and thinking about food and working out and then thinking about food and like checking on my body and thinking about food. That was like the number one focus of my entire life. And it's really interesting because at some point in this decade long struggle with an eating disorder, I started my career as a personal trainer. So I was working in the fitness industry and I was also working on the side as a nutritionist. And my whole persona and brand identity was rooted in helping women escape diet culture and have a healthy relationship with food. And so that's what I was preaching out loud to a lot of people and sharing my pieces of my story from the past about like I used to just only eat clean and then I started counting macros and that was better but then that became unhealthy and I would talk about my story but never really talk about how it was still something that I was presently struggling with because I was so ashamed of it and I was so ashamed of it to the degree where I thought about food constantly, but I didn't want people to know that I thought about food constantly because food was like the number one focus of my day. It was, when am I going to be able to eat next? What can I eat next? Because I was starving, because I was putting food on this weird pedestal of like, I can only have so much of you. It was really like a toxic relationship with like a toxic boyfriend. Like, I
And
love you, but I hate
probably that
you.
was the only thing that you had control over,
Right.
right? Because that's something you could control.
Yeah.
And, not somebody from the outside could come in and tell you, you can't have this, you can't, you're in
Yeah.
charge. Now, this is the one thing I have control over it. So you
That's it.
probably
Yeah.
decided, let me just put all my focus into it. And
Yeah, yeah, and it was something that felt really safe for
hmm
sure in its own way. That control gave me that sense of safety because it was the one thing that I knew would reliably help me escape the pain that I experienced when I was younger. Even though actually being honest and looking back on it, it wasn't helping me escape it. It was all an illusion of, my body does look a certain way. I I'm getting external validation. I was a personal trainer. People would always look up to me and tell me how fit they think that I am, or how much they admire me, or how asking me for advice so that they could look more like me. I had all of this external validation. I was creating this identity of someone that technically had a really nice body, being a personal trainer, but was so terrified of that going away, was so like absolutely in chaos around the idea that if I ate a little bit too much food or I missed a workout, that I wasn't going to be okay. That control of food, thinking about food constantly, always doing the mental calculation in my mind, was just like you're saying, it was control. It was that one thing that made me feel a sense of control, and therefore this illusion of safety. Even though it was so obvious, it was creating so much chaos for me. I was terrified of letting it go at the same time.
Because now at this time in your life, you're getting the opposite response that you've had as a younger
That's
version of
right.
you. So you're like, okay, finally I'm getting the response that's the opposite of what I was getting, but it's the positive response that I wanted. So I
Mm-hmm.
have to control the environment so I keep getting this
Yeah.
response.
So make sure
But
it never goes away.
right, but it still didn't take away of how you're feeling inside.
That's right. Yeah, not at all. And it reminds me of this quote that I always apply in the area of body image and self-confidence, but it was relayed to me in relation to money. And it's a quote by Kyle Cease in his book called The Illusion of Money. And he talks about this concept that money equals security. And if money equals security, then it doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. We're going to be terrified it's going to go away, because it equals our security. So we're not going to be feeling secure if we're terrified it's going to be going away. And the exact same thing was what I experienced with my body. It didn't matter how close I got to what I considered the ideal body, or how small of a pant size I had, or how small of a number I saw on the scale. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel secure inside of myself, because I was attributing that my confidence, my security, my safety in my life and in my body was that pant size or that number on the scale. And so if that ever went away because I ate a little bit too much, or I didn't work out for a period of time, or whatever it was, then that wasn't going to be okay. My confidence, my security, my safety, my validation, that everything that I've ever wanted is going to be taken away from me if I make a little bit of a mistake. And so I need to keep myself in this constant state of fear and anxiety and insecurity to make sure that I'm motivated to not let myself slip, which is ironic because it wasn't
Right.
actually allowing me to have what I wanted.
Not only that, it's exhausting
Yeah. Oh my
because
gosh.
you're like putting all this energy into this and probably where you should have been enjoying your life, right?
Yeah.
And really enjoying other things. And how did that impact your relationships during that time?
Yeah, there was one relationship in particular that I had for a period of my life that was a very interesting mix of having a full-blown eating disorder, but also like being so ashamed of it that I was portraying someone else externally. And so at the time, I was going through school to be a personal trainer and also starting my career as a personal trainer and as a nutrition coach. And I was also competing in bodybuilding, and I was putting content out there on social media about how you don't have to cut out certain foods and you can have a healthy relationship with food and you can work out in ways that feel good and you don't have to do a bunch of cardio to look good. And I was really trying to preach all of these healthy, balanced concepts in the world, because that was what I was trying to live in my own life. But behind the scenes, this one person that I was in a relationship with, who got to see me a lot of the time, the times where when social media gets turned off and you're not putting on the show because you're not in public anymore, and he got to see me just be in absolute chaos and shut down when I ate too much, and like absolutely be in chaos and cry for hours, or not be able to get out of bed, or cancel plans because I felt too fat that day, or be so stressed out about like, which restaurant do we go to? Well, this one has something that has this many calories and this one has something that has this many calories. I don't know if I want that. Is it going to be worth it? And if I eat that, then I might binge eat later. And it was just like, he got to witness that. He was the one person that probably actually saw that I had an eating disorder. Although I don't think he really knew what was going on either. It's just like,
right.
this is just, I guess this is just what girls do, maybe. this is just what girls talk about, is calories and their body and feeling bloated and all of that. But it really affected my relationships in that I could not be present at all. Being present was an experience I don't think that I ever had until probably the last couple of years, because I was constantly in my head calculating what I did in the past, how that's going to affect what I do in the future, what decisions I need to make in the future to make sure that my future is okay, to make sure that my body is okay in the future. And even if I was with someone and having a conversation with them, I was still like talking to them as if I was listening to them. Like I got really good at pretending, like just putting on a show and being really engaged in the conversation, asking questions, repeating things back to them, but really not being there at all, because I was lost in my own inner world of ick and
all those
body
thoughts
image.
about, what do I look like right now? Oh my God, are they
Yes,
seeing, what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling? I feel bloated.
exactly.
Are they seeing that I'm bloated? Or all those crazy thoughts that go in your head?
Yeah.
Now, what prompted your healing journey? Like, what was the thing that really, kicked you in the butt where you said, okay, I have to get help?
Mhm. It was a moment that I call the big epiphany. And leading up to this moment, there was kind of a prelude to the big epiphany that I'll explain in a moment. And it was a day where I was invited out to go out with a new friend of mine who wanted to go out dancing to like this bar. It was like an outdoor, it was in the summer, this outdoor bar. And that was something that I had never done before, because up until that point, I had been very isolated. I didn't really have many friends in my early adult life because of eating disorder and body image stuff, but also because I was trying to get my career started and starting a business. And that was also all consuming at the same time, just as much as my disordered eating and body image stuff was. And so at this point, I was starting to move towards creating a more social life for myself, even though that was very uncomfortable and very intimidating to me at the time. And this new friend that I had who invited me to go out dancing with her, I remember when she invited me out, I felt this immediate contraction of fear and intimidation, because I knew her and I admired her for being someone that is so outgoing and comfortable with herself. And I knew that if I went out with her, she was going to be around talking to everybody, making new friends, dancing, being free, and all of that. And I had no idea what to expect, that what I was going to be like. But I knew that that wasn't me, because I had never gone out before. But I remember just looking at the text message and being like, I don't want to choose to be the same. I want to go out and I want to make a different decision than previous Kelly would have made. And I was into self-development a lot at this time. And so I was really trying to challenge myself to become a different version of myself. And so I said yes. And I went out to this bar, and I remember it was like an outdoor space, and we were there and no one else was really there yet. And she wanted to just dance. She was like in the middle, like everyone was sitting down, and she's like, let's dance. And I'm like, okay. And I just remember like my whole body, it felt like I was in a straight jacket. Like my brain was going a million miles a minute, and I'm like trying to mimic the movements that she's doing. And I'm just like in this ick of darkness in my mind, just like, oh my God, I must look disgusting. These people are going to judge you. Like, what are you doing? Like, she looks so good. You look ridiculous next to her. Like, what is wrong with you? And my inner critic just got so all consuming. And it was just, it was such an uncomfortable experience. I couldn't even believe how uncomfortable I felt. I knew it was going to be like a little bit of a growth edge for me to go out and do something I had never done before, but it was shocking how I had such a visceral reaction to just wanting to go out like with my friend. And it was in that moment that I had such a life-changing realization. And it was that I had spent the last 10 years of my life completely obsessed and dedicated to changing my body so that I could feel confident. And even though I had spent the last 10 years learning and becoming an expert on all of the best science-based fitness and nutrition principles and doing all of this self-development work on how to finally feel confident in my body, I don't. Mm-hmm. I don't at all, to the point where I literally feel like I want to slide under the table and hide when I'm just supposed to be out hanging out with a new friend that I'm making and having fun. And that moment planted the seed for me. And it was probably within the next 1 to 2 months that the big epiphany happened. And it happened where I was actually listening to a podcast. I randomly stumbled across a new podcast that was all about eating disorder recovery and body image stuff. And I just listened to one episode and listened to this girl relay her experience of having an eating disorder and not knowing that she had an eating disorder. And it was like light bulb, like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I need to be more honest with myself. Maybe I actually am struggling with this a lot more than I've been willing to acknowledge. And I just, that whole weekend after discovering this podcast, binge listened to probably like 20 to 30 episodes and just going through this huge, like purging awakening of just like the veil has been lifted. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to do something about
like
this.
Reality hit, right? Where you finally came to realizing what you've been experiencing. Like it's now right there in black and white for you. Can't ignore it. Right. And now you have to face it.
Right. Right. And I felt ready to face it for the first time ever, really, because up until that point, I had had moments where the veil would be lifted and I would see, oh, what I'm doing is not healthy, or I'm a little bit too obsessed with this, or this is having too much of a negative impact on my life. Maybe I need to change what I'm doing. And I would commit myself to changing it, whether it was I'm going to just completely stop dieting, or I'm going to intuitively eat, or I'm going to let myself eat more, and maybe I'll gain weight, and that's okay. But it was always with this unwritten condition that, but if my body changes too much, you're going to go back. Yeah. Right. And that set me up for this environment where I didn't have a set rule of what means too much. And so anything as small as a bad body image day, or a stream of bad body image days, or my pants fitting a little bit tighter that day, it would just be like red flag, got to go back to what I was doing before, start eating less calories somehow, gain some sense of control so that you can fix this. And I would, but I knew that this time had to be different. I knew that what I was committing to, if I ever wanted to really heal and get off this hamster wheel and not just go fall back asleep in the same pattern that I had been in for the last several years, I needed to commit to an unconditional recovery, which meant that no matter what happened, no matter how much my body changed, no matter what pant size I ended up being, that I couldn't go back. And
so what did you decided to do, like to go through that healing path? Like what type of healing did you seek to help you get through this?
Yeah, well, I'll start by sharing the more tangible stuff. And it was that I committed myself to completely abandoning and actively rejecting anything that was under the purpose of trying to manipulate or control the size and shape of my body. And so in a practical level, that meant that if I ever went out to, let's say, a coffee shop, and I caught myself looking at the desserts in the window. I'm like, that looks good. Normally I'd be like, yeah, but that's too many calories, or no, I already ate enough today. I would see that and actively reject it by getting it. And I did this in all of these different ways. If I saw something at the grocery store and saw like, oh, but that's too many calories, oh, now I have to get it. And that's how I was practically holding myself through these changes. But then on a more of an inner healing note, um, my body, it was really fun for, I would say, the first 2 months, because it was like, I have unconditional food freedom. I'm allowing myself to have all of these different experiences and going out to restaurants and not worrying about what I'm eating. And it's great. It was like liberating and so much fun. And I felt so just like, oh, I'm so happy I made this decision. And then probably 2 months into it, um, I remember seeing a photo of myself that I went out with a group of friends, to kind of as like a going away party, because I was moving across the country, and we all took a photo together, and I just saw my eyes just go immediately to myself and just felt this overwhelming shame of just like, oh, is that what I look like? I had no idea that I look like that, and just immediately felt all of that old, fearful, scary, dark tactics that I used to use to fling me back into my normal set of control by controlling my food. And then on the ride home, when I was getting dropped off, one of my friends asked me if I wanted to stop and get dessert, get an ice cream on the way home. And I just remember sitting there like, I can't, like looking at the photo in my brain. I can't do that. No. And I was like, but I told myself that I was going to actively reject those thoughts. And so I immediately told her no. And then I was like, you know what? I will. And it was just like feeling all of this darkness like come up and just like not be able to do anything about it. It was like, God, is this worth it? Is this
Right.
worth it? And that was probably my experience almost nonstop for the next 4 months following that time, because my body continued to change and I was watching it change, and I was watching myself not be able to fit into my clothes anymore and feeling all of the darkness, all of the inner chaos. Like, it wasn't that bad before. You can go back to what you were doing. Just eat a little bit less. You'll be fine. You're just being dramatic. You didn't have an eating disorder. You're going to be fine. And just watch all of that come up internally and feeling all the shame and just like looking in the
So,
mirror and being
in
like,
a
"Oh my
way,
gosh."
it was the decision to reverse your eating habits,
Mhm.
kind of the denial that you had an eating disorder.
Right. Yeah, that was my justification. The way that my mind so easily justified going back into what felt safe and comfortable in the past. And this time, through this healing journey, part of the healing practice was becoming the witness to that without acting on it. And actually making space for all of that fear and all of that shame that was coming up that normally I would act on to try to get rid of it, like act on it by going to control something, but not act on it and
Just let
actually have
it,
to feel it.
yeah, just go through the process of feeling it, let it be, and
Right.
getting through it. So how long, you said 4 months you went through that?
I would say 4 months is where it was really dark, almost nonstop. Like, I didn't even feel like I could come up for a breath of air, is what it felt like. It was like every single day I would wake up and just dread having to see myself in the mirror, and just feeling all of this chaos and just making up these scenarios in my mind where, like, I'm going to lose my career. No one's ever going to want to work with me if I'm looking this way. And also, like, coming up with all of these catastrophic things about my career and my business and my life and my relationships moving forward. And it was just one of the darkest times I think I've ever experienced, because it was all everything that I had spent a lifetime suppressing and suppressing and repressing from my childhood, like having all of these old memories come up of like where I felt similarly, where I learned this about myself, where all these limiting beliefs came from. And I learned so much about myself during that time, and did a lot of inner child work where I would recognize a feeling that I was having being connected to a thought that I was currently experiencing that was connected to a memory of where that thought or that belief was originally imprinted when I was younger. And making all these different it was very fascinating. It felt like such a spiritual time for
Right.
myself as well, making all of these crazy connections and knowing and having a connection deep inside of me of knowing that what I was experiencing was exactly right. Like, I knew on such a deep level without a shadow of a doubt that what I was going through was so purposeful. Even though it was painful, I knew that it was going to be so good, and almost having an excitement attached to it, because it was like, wow, if this is how much pain I've been suppressing my whole life and I'm finally feeling it, I'm finally letting this pain come up, what is going to be available to me on the other side of this? And that was what was kind of holding me through it. And having that, I almost have yes, and like not trying to use that excitement as a way to again suppress the pain and the
Right.
darkness,
But
trying to use that.
to get you through those
Yeah,
times, they are painful, right? When these
right.
emotions come up, these realizations come up and everything comes to the surface all at once that you have to get through and,
Yeah,
really navigate and heal those parts of you that
right.
came up with these ideas.
Yeah.
And that you believe these are false ideas that we come up with because we believe them to be true for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and it causes so much chaos that we don't even realize. So going through
Right.
that process is painful, but once you get through that, then it's like freedom, right?
It was so liberating, so liberating. And I'll quickly share a synchronistic thing that happened. I feel like the entire thing was so synchronistic in how things unfolded. But um, at one point, probably at about that 4 month mark that I was sharing, where the period of darkness was kind of starting to lift up, I was about to leave to go on my very first solo trip ever. I booked like a one-way ticket to go traveling for an indefinite amount of time. And of course, that was coming with a lot of fear of like, putting myself out there, meeting new people, going to hostels. Are people going to want to talk to me? Am I going to get confirmation that people don't want to be around me because of the way that my body looks now? And would this have been better if I was skinnier? And like, should I start dieting for this trip? Like, all of that was starting to come up, but I was just being present with it without acting on it. And the week before I left for the trip, I went out with my cousin and a couple of his friends, just kind of like a going away, like, see you when you get back type of thing. And we went out dancing, which at this point I had become a little bit more embodied and was having fun going out dancing. Like I was it's crazy how I was actually in a way more confident then than I was like when I went out with my friend like the year prior, when I had that big epiphany moment, because my body was so different at this point, but oddly also felt more embodied and confident in it, even though I was going through all this darkness. And something so magical happened that night where I was like dancing with this girl that I just met, and we were like having a good time. And then I accidentally fell. I like tripped backwards and I fell on top of her. And it was like, it was so crazy. Like, I just felt my body go into an immediate trauma response. So much pain, so much shame, like deep, deep shame. The voice in my head was like, you are a monster. You're so disgusting. You probably hurt her. You fell on top of her. Like, how could you? You're so gross. Like, you need to change this. Like, it was so loud and so obvious. And I was just like in total like trauma response. And my cousin looked at me afterwards and he's like, are you okay? Are you good? And I just immediately started sobbing in the middle of this bar. Like I'm sobbing my eyes out after like being lifted off of this girl. And he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. And so he took me outside and asked me to talk to him about what was coming up. And I just remember crying to him, sharing exactly what was going on in my mind. I'm like, I can't believe I fell on her. I'm so disgusting. Like, oh my God, like I'm so ugly. I'm so fat. Like, if I was skinny, that wouldn't have been a problem. Like, I need to be different. Like, I probably hurt her. Like, I'm so gross. Like, this is why no one wants to be my friend. And I was just like vomiting all of this crazy stuff out. And it was so, the entire time I was sharing it and sobbing and crying, like, all I could feel was just my child self, my inner child, and everything that she experienced when she was younger. when she accidentally hurt another girl and then was like, oh my God, it's because of my body. If I was skinnier, I wouldn't have hurt her. And I'm gross. I'm disgusting. Like my body is gross. And just having that be triggered in that moment, I literally cried for 3 hours, like with my friend and my cousin. We were just sitting there and we were like going to all these different bars and like sitting down, and I'm just there like
Crying
tears
it off.
streaming down my face. But it was like I wasn't sad crying. It was like I could feel the liberation. I could feel that there was healing happening. And I didn't want to let it stop. It felt so good. It was just like, wow, I didn't know this was in here. Like, finally, it's coming up,
It's
all this
coming up.
darkness. And it was so crazy how it happened the week before I left for my trip, because it was as soon as I landed I went to South America, I went to Colombia. And I remember looking in the mirror when I got to my room and just hearing the music going on upstairs and being like, I'm going to choose not to be fearful. I'm not going to let my insecurities get to me. I'm going to go out there and it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it. And I had the most incredible time and met so many people and got so much confirmation of like, new people are attracted to me. People want to be around me. People want to be my friend. People want to make plans with me despite my body. And
Because you
that was
finally release that,
right.
inner belief,
That's right.
that those emotions that told you otherwise. And it's
Exactly.
interesting the fact that what we don't realize often is how we feel inside gets projected in the outside. So if we feel
Yeah.
like people don't like us, we're unapproachable, then that's what we're gonna experience in the
Right.
outside world. But once you start going through the healing process and you start feeling confident and good about yourself, then you're going to get that same reaction in the outside. People are going to like you regardless of what you look like or what, they're reacting not on your physical aspects, but what you're
Right.
projecting from inside out.
Right. That's exactly it. And it was so wild and liberating to experience that reflection being mirrored back to me. And just like you're saying, like I can look back on times where before I had this healing, before I decided to commit to my eating disorder recovery, I would go out and I would see the confirmation of what was inside of me, that people didn't want to be around me, even though I technically had, the fit body and I was a personal trainer, but I was so closed off energetically because of all that trauma that I hadn't looked at, that I hadn't healed, that it didn't matter what I looked like because my energy was matching what I believed and what I was afraid was true based on what I
Right.
experienced when I was younger. And so it's so wild to me, just like you're saying, how much our outer reality is just a reflection of what we see and what we believe and what we feel inside. And I have no doubt that that's true.
Absolutely. Now, Kelly, now you're doing something really wonderful based on this experience of yours, which
Thank you.
is really helping others come to the same realization that you've come to. So tell us
Yeah.
about what you're doing right now.
Thank you. Yes, I feel so blessed to be in the type of work that I am, and how my work has evolved so much with my own personal evolution in this space. And now I've been able to integrate so much of my own personal experiences and healing with my body image and my relationship with food into the work that I'm doing with my coaching clients. And so I work with people on helping them feel at home and safe inside of themselves, inside of their bodies, helping them really free themselves of all of the weight that their insecurities and their inner criticism and their comparison patterns and all of the things that we associate with having a negative self-image has on their life, by learning how to have a different relationship with those parts of themselves. Because the truth is, my insecurity, my bad body image, it's not gone, but I just have a completely different relationship with it now, where it doesn't have that same impact on my life. And that is the core of the work that I do with my clients. And so I have a coaching program called the Kelevate Method that is a 6-month program designed to support people in having a healthier relationship with themselves, with their bodies, with food and exercise. And we really focus on doing really deep body image and self-image work, in addition to helping people find peace with food again, having a healthy relationship with food, and using food freedom and intuitive eating as the guideline for that, as well as empowered movement and learning how to move your body in a way that actually makes you feel good in your life. And it isn't just being used as a vehicle to help you control and manipulate your body so that you can feel this illusion of safety through control, because you're already feeling safe and feeling nourished from the inside, that your nutrition and your exercise just gets to be a natural byproduct of that.
That's amazing. And where can people reach you if they wanted to work with you?
So I have a website. You can find me at Kelevate. So it's the word elevate, like an elevator, elevate, but with a K.
Okay.
Kelevate Coaching. .com. You can also find me on Instagram at Kelevate _. And you can also find me on my podcast by searching either Apple or Spotify for Kelevate.
Awesome. And I'll have your links below our videos and under the podcast where you can reach out to Kelly. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. And thank you all for listening. Please remember to subscribe, to like, and share so I can bring you more of these stories to you every week. So until next week.